Know thyself. You were taught those two words are Greek. Socrates, Delphi. The birth of Western thought. Here's what they didn't teach you. The Greeks who carried that idea home wrote down where they went to learn it. They said Egypt. They said it in their own books, and somebody, much later, decided you didn't need to know that. Understand what was actually taken here. Not gold, not land. Those went too, but that's not this. What was taken was authorship, the credit for thinking. Because a people who believe they built nothing walk through the world a certain way. They ask permission, they apologize for taking up space, they call other people's ideas civilization and their own folklore. That's not an accident, kin. That's an outcome, and it was engineered. Today I'm going to show you the receipts, not opinions, names, books, and dates you can check tonight. And I'm going to show you something else, something most channels covering this will not tell you, where our own side got it wrong. Because math is the measure, even when the measure costs us. Before we go in, if you want the rest of this series, subscribe and hit like. That carries it to the next kin who needs it. And send it to one person who sat in a classroom and was never told their people thought first. That's how we find each other. Let's start with the witnesses and notice who they are. Not African writers defending Africa. Greek writers writing in Greek for Greeks. Herodotus, 5th century before this era, the man Europe calls the father of history. He goes to Egypt, he looks around, and he writes that geometry began there, that the Egyptians worked it out, measuring land after the Nile flooded, and that it passed from them to Greece. That's not me saying it. That's their historian, Plato. In the Timaeus, he tells of Solon, one of the great Greek lawmakers, sitting in an Egyptian temple at Sais, and an Egyptian priest says to him, "You Greeks are always children. There is no old Greek." Plato wrote that down about his own people. Isocrates writes that Pythagoras, the man whose name is on a theorem in your child's schoolbook, went to Egypt, became a student there, and brought philosophy back to Greece. And Diodorus goes further. He gives a list. Orpheus, Homer, Solon, Plato, Pythagoras, Democritus, Eudoxus, Greeks who studied in Kemet. Read that list again. That is not a fringe theory. That is their own record of themselves. Now the dates, because dates don't argue. Imhotep, around 2,650 years before this era, architect of the step pyramid, physician, sage, so respected he was later honored as a god of medicine. Hippocrates, the man Europe calls the father of medicine, is born around 460 before this era. Do that subtraction, kin. Roughly 2,200 years. The gap between Imhotep and Hippocrates is longer than the gap between Hippocrates and you. And the documents survived. The Edwin Smith papyrus, a surgical text, case by case, the injury, the examination, the verdict, the treatment. That is clinical method, written down 1,000 years before Greek medicine. The Rhind papyrus, mathematics, fractions, areas, volumes, copied by a scribe named Amose from a document already centuries old when he copied it. Someone in Kemet was teaching this, and someone was taking notes. So here's the real question. If the Greeks said Egypt, and the papyri say Egypt, when did the story change? Not in antiquity. That's the part people get wrong. For most of recorded history, nobody disputed this. The ancient world took it as ordinary that Egypt was the old school and Greece the young student. The change came late, the 17 and 1800s, the centuries of the slave ship and the colony, because an empire that is selling human beings needs a story about who those human beings are. It cannot afford an Africa that taught Greece to think. So the scholarship was rewritten until the Greeks appeared out of nowhere, brilliant, self-made, with no teachers and no debts, even though the Greeks themselves had said otherwise in writing for 2,000 years. The theft wasn't in antiquity, kin. The theft was in the footnotes, recently, on purpose. Now the part I promised. And I want you to stay with me, because this is the most important minute of this video. The book that made this argument famous is called Stolen Legacy by George G. M. James, 1954. Brave book. It put this conversation into the world, and it contains a claim you have probably heard repeated, that Aristotle stole his work from the Library of Alexandria. That claim is not true, not disputed, not true. Aristotle died around 322 before this era. The great library was not built until decades after his death. He could not have taken a single scroll from a building that did not exist while he was alive. Now, I could have left that out. Most channels do. It's a better story with it in. But think about what we would be doing, defending a stolen legacy with a forged receipt, weighing our own heart on a scale we tampered with. That is not the way of the feather. And here is the thing, kin, we don't need it. Take that one claim out, and what's left? Herodotus, Plato, Isocrates, Diodorus, Imhotep, the Edwin Smith papyrus, the Rhind papyrus. The case is not weakened. The case is bulletproof, because now every single piece of it survives being checked. Truth doesn't need help. It needs witnesses. So come back to those two words. Know thyself. Egypt did not need to borrow that instruction. Kemet had been writing self-knowledge for centuries. The Sebite, the teachings, Imhotep, Amenemope, instruction after instruction, telling a person how to examine himself, hold his tongue, weigh his own heart. We covered one of those systems on this channel already, 42 laws and a feather. So when you hear, know thyself, don't hear a Greek slogan on a wall. Hear an instruction and apply it as one. This week, take one single thing you were taught to credit elsewhere. One, medicine, mathematics, architecture, philosophy, and go look up where it actually starts. Not from me, from the sources. Check my work. Because knowing yourself is not a feeling, kin. It's an audit. And when you find the first one, something happens. You stop asking permission to be descended from thinkers. That's episode 1. In episode 2, we go at one document. There is a book of the Bible that runs so close to the teachings of an Egyptian scribe named Amenemope that scholars have spent a century arguing about who copied whom. Same sayings, same order. We'll open both and read them side by side. Until then, tell me in the comments, what's one thing you were taught was Greek? Just name it. Somebody in the replies will know where it really starts. Walk the way with us. Subscribe. Ma'at is the measure.